Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Macklemore and Ryan Lewis called This Unruly Mess I've Made. You know why people hate liberals? Because they lose. If liberals are so goddamn smart, why do they lose so goddamn often? Now, before you all think that you're clicking on the wrong video here, that was a quote from a self-identified Republican from the Aaron Sorkin penned show on HBO, The Newsroom in 2012. And as we head into the upcoming train wreck that will be the 2016 general election, I think we can start to see an answer to that question, at least in the United States. It's not an answer that anybody wants to hear, especially as a liberal, but whereas most conservatives will unite despite most internal schisms, look to see them all rally behind Donald Trump coming into 2016 this year, liberals will demand ideological purity and drive people away, preferring to win right rather than actually win, which can make the losses all the more costly in the long run. Okay, so what does any of that have to do with Macklemore? A good but not great independent rapper who has released his sophomore record pairing him with the perennially underrated producer Ryan Lewis. Well, the more I've seen the hype and even greater backlash to Macklemore, the more I've come to realize that his career will probably be most damaged by the audience who you think would be a natural fit for him. The social justice community, the people where he wants to be on their side. Keep in mind, this is a rapper who months before Thrift Shop caught fire, released a song supporting same-sex marriage in the United States, and who has released music criticizing the industry and is exploring his own alcoholism, showing real vulnerability on albums. And yet in the past few years, I've seen Macklemore be dealt more hatred, distrust, and outright scorn from an audience that on the surface you'd expect to be more receptive than rappers you think who have said much bigger targets and have said far worse things. Now, to be clear, it hasn't helped exactly that Macklemore is not particularly artful in some of his social commentary, and being entirely too earnest and corny makes him really easy to mock. But of all the criticisms leveled against him, the one that he is mercenary and profiting off the social justice movement, while not truly believing in it, is the most ludicrous and frustrating for me. Well, it's because if that was true, he wouldn't nearly screw up as often and invite the tidal wave of hatred that he gets. He's trying too hard to be all that believable that he's being mercenary here. There are legitimate grievances with him. His work is clumsy and broadly sketched. He's proven too willing to be the martyr, especially in public outside of the music. The tonal whiplash between goofy and preachy can be kind of disconcerting. And at the end of the day, as a rapper, he's a lot more dud lines than he really should. But for as hard as Macklemore is trying, it truly is frustrating to see the audience that you think would actually receive him with open arms counterattack instead of actually try to help. So when I heard that Macklemore's newest collaboration with Ryan Lewis was going to be called This Unruly Mess I've Made, it made too much sense. Here was a man who has had an exceedingly messy few years trying to make sense of it all, and given the extremely mixed critical response to this album, I wasn't sure it was gonna land for me. And his list of featuring credits was even more bizarre, spanning Golden Age Titans of Hip Hop to Ed Sheeran, KRS-One to YG, Anderson .Paak to Idris Elba. So what kind of mess did we get here? Well, if you can't tell by my introduction, which I normally put together before I listen to the album in full, I really want to like this album. I'm a fan of this guy, and I don't like it as much as I wanted to. And the frustrating thing is that it's all across the board. It's not just the album lacks cohesion in favor of tonal whiplash. It's not just that Macklemore is outshone by most, if not all, of his guest stars. And it's not just the broadly sketched politics and humor that really made me cringe a lot more often than it should. It's all of it put together, plus the overwhelming feeling that Macklemore is trying so goddamn hard and just isn't able to match what he put together in the heist. I'm sorry. Pretty much across the board, too. And yeah, I'm gonna have to include Ryan Lewis in that, too, because while it's easily the most consistent element, the production didn't really grab me in the way I was hoping, and that's definitely a disappointment. But then again, disappointment's probably the best word to describe this album. Where to even start with this? Well, let's start with the underlying dichotomy that's been at the heart of Macklemore's dramatic persona, balancing the wacky, oddball, frequently corny jokester that can still occasionally have an interesting point, and the darker, more introspective MC who gets angry, gets a little bit more political, and can occasionally make a meaningful and powerful statement. In a twisted sort of way, you think about it, it's very much like the dichotomy that used to run at the core of Eminem. And while I was listening to this album, there were quite a few comparison points between the two that I did not expect, and most of them weren't favorable. From the similarities in flow, especially on the encore-esque delivery that came on Light Tunnels, to the momentum-killing ballad about his daughter on Growing Up that might as well be Haley's song Part 2, to the broadly sketched and overly goofy pop culture references doubling on jokes like on Let's ass eat, and the excruciating Brad Pitt's cousin, say nothing of all the dick jokes that ran through that song and Dance Off. There were a lot more explicit parallels than I expected, to the point where I was surprised that Macklemore did make it more overt by outright mentioning Eminem on White Privilege too, beyond just flow similarities and subtext. But here's the thing, there's always been a sense that through the Slim Shady alter ego, that allowed Eminem the distance to be a little bit more daring with his content, more confrontational, actually expose human failings about himself, his audience, and society as a whole. Macklemore never really creates that distance, and since he's very much aware that he is under the microscope here, there are points where you can tell that the pressure is kind of crushing him and forcing him to compromise. Now, do you want examples of that? Okay, let's take a look at all the guest stars, nearly all of whom show Macklemore up on this album. Now, in a few cases, that was inevitable, and the music is good enough that I'll give him pretty much a pass here. The golden age hip-hop stars that show up on Downtown, they might not do anything crazy on the verses, but they definitely own the stage when they do show up, along with Eric Nally, to the point where Macklemore's less expressive delivery does hurt him, along with some unfortunate lyrical flubs. And keep in mind, I still really like that song. Go a step further and you have Buckshot, which is co-produced by DJ Premier, and Macklemore really is on his game, even if it is a pale facsimile thematically of what B. Dolan did on Graffiti Busters. And then KRS-One shows up, and that's not even fair at this point. I say the same for Need to Know with Chance the Rapper, but honestly that song puts me in a bit of a weird spot regardless. Happy because the message is basically the same as what Chance already did on All My Friends with Tinashe and Snake Hips, and happy because it's a lot more subtle in his verse than Macklemore's opener, just leaves you feeling a little bit offbeat there. Similar case with Bow Tie with YG of all people, where Macklemore's verses feel like a more conflicted Real Friends. That sort of more money, more problems rant feels strikingly out of place, especially coming from him, and YG pivots for a more angry, more poignant verse about gangsta stereotypes that rings a lot stronger, but kinda weird in contrast. And then there's Idris Elba and Anderson .Paak on Dance Off, a goofy track that I honestly wish was more fun, as Macklemore strings together too many painful punchlines about dicks, and yet, even as Idris Elba, he only does the hook, and Anderson .Paak maybe has 4 bars, they're the highlight of the song for me. Because here's the thing, there is some content here with potential, and even some thematic resonance when you dig for it. I like Downtown when it goes broad and silly. I like the reflections on the past and graffiti art on Buckshot. And I'll say it, I thought White Privilege 2 had some real power to it, as it tried to get to the roots of Macklemore's internal crises surrounding his place in modern hip-hop and Black Lives Matter. Does it suck that more people will end up paying attention to Macklemore over black artists who have said this before for decades? Absolutely. But again, it's a song intended for the hordes of white kids who have never cared about white privilege, not those who have been active in the social justice community or who are better informed. Of course, if you want to galvanize that audience, it might have worked better if he structured the song for radio play in the same way that Same Love fit in, which ties into the themes and messaging of this album. Now, I'll repeat what I've said in the past when an artist goes political. Precision, populism, power. And to his credit, Macklemore can usually get 2 out of 3. And yet there are so many songs where the lack of nuance or the inability to take that final step and really make it click just gets on my nerves. Let's See, easy example. It's a jokey song about poor nutrition that actually rings kind of true because of the populism, and it goes down pretty easy. It's got a jaunty little piano melody to it. But between the corny celebrity jokes and the lack of follow-through means that this is no thrift shop. When he gets serious, the wholescape even bigger. I appreciate the broadsides level at the pharmaceutical industry on Kevin, but it never gets as visceral as when Hobson made Old Friend, or when Pharoah Monch made the entire PTSD album in 2014. Which was also more visceral. White Privilege 2 has this problem too to a lesser extent. Just reading an article often isn't enough, Macklemore, to get the complete point or actually stand up. But the track that I want to single out on is the opener, Light Tunnels, which has the bombast and drama to land as a killer opener targeting the emptiness of show business and celebrity in the Grammys. And yet when Macklemore and Ryan Lewis won for the heist, the big story wasn't about the award, but Macklemore's apology to Kendrick, and we don't even get an implied mention of that. It's a distancing choice. Macklemore doesn't want to get too real, but it's the completely wrong choice of the way that the album is framed and for its better content, which actually digs into the undercurrent of depression and insecurity beneath the surface with Macklemore. Songs like Saint Ides and The Train, they do this very well, and are actually 2 of my favorites on this record. The first cutting into Macklemore's complicated past and alcoholism, including his relapse, now in sharper reflection as it all fades away. The second really delving into the detachment from friends and family that comes to the pursuit of his passions. Macklemore is subtle and eloquent enough on these songs to make me wish the album album had been willing to at least try to underplay, or at the very least dig deeper into Macklemore himself. Hell, even despite the problems, that's why White Privilege 2 actually has some impact for me. Unfortunately, this album doesn't really go deeper, playing more for bombast and flash and pop sensibilities, and this is where we have to talk about the instrumentation and production. And look, most of this is not Ryan Lewis's fault. He's giving Macklemore probably what he asked for with the big hooks and the broad instrumentation progression with the flashy horns and the strings and the production. But when placed against the emotional undercurrents of this album, it can feel jarring as hell. Most of this is an issue with the hooks that are just overdone and melodramatic, like in the gospel touch Kevin with Leon Bridges with a percussion beat that feels oddly too quick in its tempo, or on Growing Up with Ed Sheeran. But then you get Need to Know, and while I appreciate the soulful touches, it just feels a lot brighter with the major chords and yet clumsier than it should be given the subject matter. I actually much prefer the discordant plucked strings and piano on St. Ides, or the windswept piano minimalism on The Train, or the jagged transitions on White Privilege 2. And then there are outright tonal choices that feel like mistakes, from the blaring tone on Dance Off to the muddy and overmixed Brad Pitt's Cousin, complete with garish effects and samples that just grated on my nerves. And somebody tell me why all the horns before the end of Light Tunnel sound so completely flat except the trumpet? Even Buckshot with DJ Premier, it had the tone running through the entire mix that sounded like a mosquito by your ear. It's weird to say it, but Downtown is probably the song that holds its weird instrumentation together the best, and I never expected to say that. And look, I know what you're all gonna say. This album is supposed to be messy and scattershot. Look at the title. But without underlying cohesion or a solid sense of sequencing, that's not an excuse. A lot of people said the same thing about The Life of Pablo by Kanye West. And on some level, while there are more songs that I liked from here than that album, there's also a fair few more songs I consider outright unlistenable. This unruly mess I've made, it's a step down from The Heist. And no, I'm not gonna be generous here. It's a strong 5 out of 10 and only a recommendation for hardcore fans. Folks, I really wanted to like this album. I am a Macklemore fan, but there are too many whack lines, sloppy instrumental choices, and content decisions in bad taste for me to really get behind it. Congratulations for making a mess, Macklemore, but anybody can do that. I'd much rather see actually, clean it up. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Just in case you know, I did a recent collaboration with the Double Agent, half on his channel, half on my channel, where we count down the top 10 worst hit songs of 2008, almost 8 years ago. We had a lot of fun shooting the collaboration. There's going to be a link to it in the description below. I want you guys to go all check this out, and check out his channel too. We really had a lot of fun putting that video together. Outside of that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a listen, I will try to fit them in. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.